Thank you, Father, for the day. Thank you for this moment to be with my really and truly. I feel like our guest today and I have known each other since birth. It has been a long time, but I'd say it's more like 40 years. Unbelievable.
Right?
Maybe not quite, but it's something around there. And I'm
Close
so
enough.
grateful for this friendship and so grateful to have the opportunity to have a conversation and introduced her to any of you in the audience that has not met her before. Mary Beth Lee. I mean, I'm going to read something because it'll do better than me introducing because I'd go on, never talk to her. I wouldn't ask her any questions. Mary Beth Lee, she's a clinical social worker and the founder and CEO of Tribe Consulting, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that she will be launching soon. We're not going to go there just yet, but she literally will help guide individuals and groups and communities through traumatic loss and grief. And I love this with Sherpa like expertise. I'm not going to go over and over so many things I'd like to share with you about Mary Beth, but I will tell you that we are kind of catching up in this conversation with you all. And so, welcome to we kind of go and we go deep and we go fast because that's just how we are. And Mary Beth inspires and she helps others in a manner that people need. She was in an accident and sometimes describes her life before and after the accident. She writes books. She has a precious child, and heaven above is how I reference that. And she has three precious children right here on this planet with us, two darling grandbabies. And Mary Beth, first of all, thank you for how you interact and support and help others and how you're such a great example to me and all those that have the privilege to know you. And for our audience, could you give maybe a bird's eye view, which is what got you to where you are today and what you're doing today? By the way, if I did not say that Mary Beth is a multi-passionate entrepreneur, let me throw that in the mix. So thank you for being here. Tell the audience a little bit about where you've come from and how you've and what you're working on this day today, because that changes a lot.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. And Carol, thank you for all the kind things. But let me tell you, you are one of the people when I talk about tribe or you talk about tribe consulting, you're one of those people who I wouldn't be standing here without the support of people like you. And you've inspired a lot of people, including me. And I'm grateful for our friendship and relationship. And you'll never know how much each little text and little call or whatever it is, the support you've given me over the years has meant, and to so many other people out there.
Hmm.
um it's funny because I've been working on this book for a long time, and originally my book was going to be just about my accident, losing a child, having a son with a brain injury, having two little ones, navigating a very complex, medical issue, a brain injury where I was told our son was not going to ever walk, talk, drive, have a car, have a job, any of that. Um, and it has evolved over time as I went back and got my clinical social work degree. I had an undergrad in psychology, but I did social work because I'm actually also passionate about social justice. So that ties into really things that happened to me as a small child. As a very young child, I noticed indifferent that the actually I noticed that I had been given a lot in my life, really young enough to understand gratitude, but I had it early. And I noticed the differences and injustices. And that has always bothered me. And I knew at some point in my life, I wanted to do something about that. And I never really, my life has sort of happened organically to lead me to where I am right now. And obviously, the accident did have an impact on me deciding to be a clinical social worker and wanting to help people who have gone through traumatic loss and grief. But it's also expanded beyond that because it's also about love and connection and the things that we need, making meaning. How do we survive life when there are other stressors we have? And I feel like I was born with a lot of privileges, um, and live with a lot of privilege, but there are a lot of people out there who haven't been that lucky and have lived with generational trauma, generational stress. And so I'm passionate about that as well. So it's funny because my book's focus has gotten almost to the point where, the person who is helping me is saying, okay, you've got to hone in on this because I'm passionate about so many things. So anyway, ask away because I don't know where to start, but
First of all, I'm covered in chills. So I'm going to start here, Mary Beth. When you and I met,
mhm,
it was at a little league field, may have been the first time we met.
I think it was.
And I was
You
probably
had a
nursing
little
a baby.
baby with you.
I did, and I was nursing a baby anyway. And you know what? First of all, I'm grateful that's where we met. What
Right,
a joyful moment in time. At
right.
this time, things were something that I know there's not such a thing as normal, except for on the washing machine. However, it we understood where we were in life.
Well, we were all in a good this was before my tragedy. It was when we were all having the
Yes,
joy of our lives, which is our raising our children. I mean, that's,
yes, yes. First
out
marriages,
on the little league
no
field,
divorces at that time.
with
Really,
great friends, great people. I
ah,
mean, we really did live a fairy tale life, but like Mayberry,
yes,
little community. We were very
yes.
lucky.
And then not long after that, we were just rocking along as people do. And maybe you a little more grateful and in touch. I think for a long time for me, I took a little too much for granted. But anyway, different conversation. And then there you are, and some of the audience knows so much and loves you so much already. But tell the audience a little bit about your trip to Colorado and the accident, kind of what happened.
Okay, so on August 8th of 1998, my sister had come up to visit us in Estes, and I was coming back. The kids were well, Johnny and Christopher, my two oldest, were about to start a week long, right before school started, like reading math enrichment program at St. John's. And so I had my car packed, a luggage rack on top, bikes in the back, lacrosse sticks, everything we needed. And my sister was a couple hours behind me on the road, and we were driving back to Houston from Estes, and I was in a really violent rollover, single car. I lost control of my car, and we flipped 4 times, and Johnny and Christopher, my two oldest, were ejected from the car. Johnny was 13, Christopher was 11, Joey was 9, and Allie was 5. Now, they were properly belted, which is a whole nother story. The officer who arrived at the scene said, "Ma'am, your children's seatbelts are still fastened," which I knew. I was a nut about safety. Um, and from there, 3 ambulances later, we are at a hospital in Pueblo, Colorado, which I at the time knew was not good because the only level 1 trauma hospital was in Denver. So I'm on the side, while they're getting everybody in ambulances, and we're going to this hospital screaming, "Please get my kids to Denver." So we get to the emergency room in Pueblo, and it's not good for either one, Johnny or Christopher. And I was told they were waiting for the whatever life flight to come get the boys and take them to Denver. And Johnny ended up having to have surgery before, so they took Christopher ahead, and Johnny died in Pueblo. Christopher was arrived. My sister got to Denver, um, and was told 5 reasons why Christopher probably wouldn't live. It was he broke his pelvic bone in 3 places. He had all these broken bones and a very severe traumatic brain injury, shearing injury. So it impacted all of the parts of his brain. It wasn't just a localized brain injury. And at that time, they didn't have the technology like they did after the Gulf War when they, took part of your scalp off. So the secondary trauma from the initial insult of his brain injury made it worse. So my sister's husband at the time, my ex-husband was on his way to meet us in Amarillo, and my dad was able to catch him to fly straight to Denver. And my sister's husband at the time took my children, Joey and Allie, who just had minor injuries, up to Denver. And then I actually could not leave Johnny's body. I couldn't do it. So my sister's in-laws had some connections, and I was able to, this sounds really morbid, but take my son's body with me to Denver. And then the rest for 2 weeks was touch and go whether Christopher would live or not. And we were able to get him stable enough to life flight him to Texas Children's. And he was still on a ventilator at the time. And he remained in ICU for another 2 weeks, but still in a coma for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then once we got him stable and off of all the medicines, he went to TIER for his rehabilitation. And that's when I started working with Dr. Perry. So Bruce Perry, who's been my mentor, and I started working with him in 2005. He's the one who wrote the book, What Happened to You with Oprah Winfrey, and he wrote two other books called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog and Born to Love. So I suggest reading all of them. He's an amazing human being. But just he was called in, and we laugh about this because he asked me to join him in 2005 because they thought this mother was a little I'm not going to use the word crazy, but that she was a little out of touch with the fact that, she had just lost a child, but that this child is never going to do anything. He's going to be in a vegetative state, and she really thinks that he's, going to not be. So I was fighting and fighting and fighting and challenging and challenging and challenging. I remember when we eventually had a lawsuit against General Motors because they didn't spend the money to put a locking mechanism on the seat belts to keep my boys in their seats. Dr. Stein, who was the head of ICU, said we offered her everything, but it wasn't good enough. But I was doing Western and Eastern medicine at the time, so even in Denver, they let me bring an acupuncturist in. Christopher had an infection. And then I had some other, I was so fortunate. The head of the hospital there came and said, "Who are you?" I said, "What do you mean?" And because of our little league, there were so many doctors, they were all calling up to Denver Children's to try to see how they could help or what they could do. And I just laughed. I said, "I'm not anybody." I said, "I just happen to have a lot, live in a neighborhood near a big medical center, and I'm really lucky." And I was very lucky because, there were several people who were super influential in watching over what was happening in Denver until we got to Houston. And then, the rest of that story, Christopher went through a lot of rehabilitation. I did every kind of, you know, Eastern, Western, traditional, non-traditional kind of therapy. And obviously he graduated from high school, has a job, had a car, went to college, and had his first child, 5 months ago. So he is a miracle. And but it also took a toll on, I had a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so for my third child, Joey became the oldest overnight. He lost his oldest brother, and then it took a while with the rehabilitation. But Joey was by Christopher's bed, every little wheelchair, every little thing he got. Then, one thing, they even at his school he went to, they tied yellow ribbons at his school and said, "Okay, when Christopher walks, we're going to bring him here to cut the ribbons off." So I have a picture of Joey, kind of helping Chrissy walk to cut the ribbons off of the trees. So
Mm. Mm.
that was it. But it's been a lifelong process, and it's, my children lost a sibling, and they also have a brother who's had a brain injury, and that journey hasn't always been easy. So it has been a family affair, and but we're all really lucky that we have each other, and we've been really blessed to have the kind of community support we had. You're one of them.
I'm just gonna, I know, so I know the audience needs to take a deep breath, like, wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. When I give my talks and tell my story, I usually put a picture of puppies or something up there that just disarms you from the
Well, I
stats.
don't have any puppies, and I
No,
think
I know
the
we don't have
audience,
any puppies to flash, but just some imagery. Imagine little kitty cats or little fluffy puppies, and then we'll
uh,
be off that.
it's, first of all, I know everyone hears through that story that you're a fighter. And since you were little, because the little you said about when you were young and you noticed there was an injustice, and that's always mattered to you. You've always known that you were fortunate and you were grateful all the way to the end of this conversation. Through all of this, you're like, oh, I have this great community, I mean, so what sticks out for me, and I just have to pull a few things out for everyone because it is a lot, Mary Beth, your journey.
Right.
And I want to say thank you for sharing it. Number one, there's no telling how many people, I know probably everyone that's hearing this and those that you'll share this conversation with it's kind of like Bruce Perry. You and you immediately, he was like, okay, let's do this because he knew that you would touch so many lives. So thank you. And then the next thing is a fighter as just as an individual and then as a mother. And to go up against a team of brilliant medical professionals. When they said this and you said, nope, not good enough. This is going to happen. He's going to walk. We're going to do this. And then as that person to hear, their Joey was right by the side, so excited, and the ribbons going up, and your beautiful child, Allie, as well. I mean, all your kiddos just so amazing, which is not a surprise, by the way. However, and all creatives like you,
Mhm.
all about social justice, every one of them. It's really a beautiful thing, and they're about family and they're about fighting for what's right. And it's so interesting because although people may differ in what is right, what right's supposed to look like, I've always appreciated, and I talk to people about it all the time, and I'm happy to use you as an example, as you're also curious. It's like, okay, so we disagree, which is okay. We still need to unify to get things done that are right. So anyway, y'all, I just wanted to pull out a few things because I know this is huge. It always has been. Mary Beth's life is huge. And I think she'd be the first one to tell you that each of your lives are huge. And
No
and
doubt. It is all relevant. Listen, we all have trauma, grief, history. And I think, staying curious is important. Having a sense of humor is important. And also, I think advocating, we have to advocate for, we, in the medical community, you think, okay, these people are going to, give you everything they can. Well, that's not really the way it works. And I do a lot of work with people who don't know how to advocate or are afraid to stand up to a doctor. I mean, I can't tell you. I had one doctor come into the room and just basically cuss me out that I didn't use him to do the surgery for my son. And I'm like, well, here's why. And then I had a heart surgeon one time who my daughter has a heart condition. And that guy in front of my daughter just slammed me for getting separate, different opinions from other doctors about her condition right in front of her. And I said, we're going to step outside and talk about this. But I think that doctors are brilliant, but also they also make mistakes. And also at that point, they didn't know enough about the brain. When Christopher had his brain injury, they thought that people plateaued at 6 months and didn't know enough about neuroplasticity. Bruce, I was lucky to have him because he is all about the brain. And he just kept saying to me, repetition, repetition, repetition. And we did that. Christopher and Joey and Allie, well, Joey and Allie helped me. We made a hundreds chart and we listed all of these things that we had Christopher relearn. I mean, how to walk in a figure eight, he would pick up marbles with his toes, to just all the different muscles and pieces, things he had to relearn. I mean, Allie was left-handed. She had to teach Christopher how to tie his shoes because he was left-handed and I couldn't and Joey couldn't, or my ex, because we were all right-handed. So we were all involved. But, my kids were there by his side. And Christopher, I have to say, he was quoted in St. John's before the accident as on perseverance. That child has, he did the work and it wasn't easy. So, I have to give them all credit because it wasn't just me. I mean, I might have had the ideas and I might have pushed, but they had to do the work. Christopher had to do a lot of work and his siblings were there to support him. But they also had a lot of grief. along with it because they didn't just lose a brother, but they lost the athlete, the gifted, the friendships that went away from on both sides, Johnny's and Christopher's. So they were grateful when some of those children still stayed in their lives because it was a lot to lose so
Ah,
much, at one time. There's secondary losses when you lose someone that people don't often understand. And even for me, there were secondary losses because I lost friendships with, classmates of Johnny's parents and things like that, or even some of Christopher's for that matter.
incredible. I remember, well, so many things, but what's coming to my mind right now, thinking about the kiddos and
Hmm.
these secondary losses, which I hope that you'll come back. Maybe we'll do a regular conversation because I'd love for you to share with the audience some of your brilliance, some of the brilliance I'm sure you wish you didn't have, by the way. I remember that you were invited and you so graciously accept, like you do, to go and talk to the school, to the community, and talk about and say when someone loses someone, when there is this trauma, this tragedy in a life. And I'll never forget one of the things you shared was you said, it would not be natural not to look down and say, why not them? Why me? Why us? And I remember you saying when you first thought it, you thought, I can't believe I'm thinking it. But then it evolved to, of course, that question's coming up.
Right.
And the grace with which you explained, and again, I'm doing right now this big deep dive into surrender, but the way that you carried and continue, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know, maybe they don't, because I don't know anything about anything. That's why you're here. But
No, that is absolutely not true. Audience, that girl knows a lot about a lot of things, and we are grateful to have her. So I'm not letting you go there, honey.
I'm really and truly to this day, it crosses my mind. Does that still come up? Does
You
that
know,
still
no,
pop up?
it really doesn't. Surrender is a great word because you have to. And I'll tell you a story because I really went through a struggle. I had gone to my minister at St. Luke's, Jim Moore, who I adored, before the accident, after I had Allie, and I said, Jim, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I have enough faith. Maybe I'm not a good Christian to say, here, God, are all of my children. I don't care what happens to them. Now, how eerie is that, right? And he just said to me, and this was going to be maybe the title of my book, but I don't know. It's had so many different versions and it's almost laughable, but it was going to be fragile like a flower because that's what he said to me. He said, you're fragile like a flower. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? That did not make me feel good. That gave me no comfort. I mean, fragile like a flower. Are you kidding? I needed something. Okay. So then fast forward to my accident, and here poor Jim Moore has to deal with me. I've lost a child and have one with in a coma. So one of the few times I left Christopher's side or left my other children was to go meet with him. And he did this exercise and he said, I went when I lost my mom when I was 12, and he wrote a very good book called Bitter or Better. Um, and that's true because some people, can't get past that. Um, so I do like that, but I think and I would describe my life as bittersweet because some of it is bitter, but um, he said to me, I'm going to do this exercise, the empty chair. When my mom was 12, my mom died when I was 12, and they did this exercise and they just said, what would your mom say to you? And I looked at him and I said, my son was not yet 14. I can't imagine him saying, it's okay. I didn't have my first kiss, my first car, my first college experience, my first job, my first wife, no, not my first wife, but a wife, my first child. I couldn't get there. I just couldn't get there. So he knew he had yet again failed me. And about a month later, he connected me with a woman named Paula Darcy. And Paula has written some beautiful books. She lost her husband and her daughter while she was 6 months pregnant in a car accident. She survived. And when I connected with Paula, it was the first time, and there was another woman who from our community who had lost a child, and it's very special to me. And it's been another one of those women who mentored me through this because they had lived it. But Paula really, um, it really helped. But I still struggled with the why. And that I struggled with for a while until I was taking a welding class with a
Of course you were.
with a friend of mine's husband, Murray Powell, who is an Episcopalian priest. And I said, Murray, I said, I just can't understand why. And he said to me, Mary Beth, he said, I can't answer that. I'm in sales. I,
Interesting.
the strangest thing, it was the most comforting thing for me to hear that. He said, I'm in sales. Basically, I just is all I needed because, and then I went back to, they asked me to speak at Johnny's senior chapel when he would have been a senior. And my son Christopher, literally when he was 3, asked me how God made himself. Okay. Think about that. So I said, Christopher, there are just things in this life that will always remain a mystery. And I ended up having to really follow my own words at that point and understand that I'm not going to know the reason why. And it will always remain a mystery. And I'm at peace with that. And I surrendered to the process. And yes, it's not been easy. There are times, even now, this many
Mm,
years later, where it can be brutal. But
mm.
I think gratitude, joy, making meaning, surrendering, having faith, having support, all of those things have kept me, going. And I'm grateful for all of that.
And I'll tell you, all this makes me think about in my mind, it is by the grace of God you are here, meant to any and all that I'm going to say survivors of unimaginable. You're such a fighter for good. And what you continue, you fight for good and you fight for others to get through things and get through, as you just mentioned, with gratitude and joy. And you're walking proof of that it's possible. And it's also, I think to myself, how Johnny's beautiful self is so in that and how he is so right here. I mean, when I think about your kiddos, I'm thinking about all the kiddos. When I
Right,
think about my friends' children that have children in heaven above, they still have these children.
right.
And, you know,
That's
and
the
they
truth.
are so alive and part of your life and our lives because of the beauty and the kindness and the faith that you share by your walk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really it's incredible.
Listen, we've evolved a lot with grief. We're fortunate and I didn't even care. I went with my gut. I didn't care what people thought. I've celebrated his life. I said his name. I wanted to celebrate his life. And back then that was still not really, people thought, there was judgment there, but I didn't care because I knew my love for my son. But there were I mean, back, when you go back and look at the history of, you know, thanatology and studies on death and grief and dying, they did not think you should continue a bond with your lost loved one. They thought it was not healthy. And I think
I
that,
know that.
that is something we've gotten past. And I thank goodness we have because it's important. I don't care what your loss is, whether it's a parent, a friend, a child, we can still continue. My dad, I lost him a few years ago, and his phone is number still on my thing, and I pocket dial him all the time. And when I do, it makes me laugh. I just couldn't get rid of his number. But I also want to say, I've had an extraordinary kind of tragedy, but normal people's lives, they have grief and trauma that doesn't even have to be the loss of a person. It can be the loss of a childhood they didn't have, or the loss of a relationship they never had, or multiple different kinds of loss. And so I think it's important that it's all relative, everybody's story. And, we all have things in our life, and it doesn't have to be monumental to be, you know, something that we need to recognize and acknowledge and,
You know,
think about.
it is unbelievable. And I have to tell you, and there, other people that I'd love to have this conversation with, and I won't share names or anything because we haven't had that conversation. Let's have this conversation. But what I want to say is that it is sometimes unimaginable to me when there are these losses that we all understand are bigger than anything. And that is when you hear conversations about things that are really, I don't know, what kind of shoes somebody has on, or what color they're going to paint a room. And the reason I'm saying that to you is, you're such a creative. I mean, y'all should see how she can do a house. Anyway, but the thing about, and again, welding, I mean, all the things, but really and truly, does that, do some conversations, do you sometimes, do you just surrender because the people having these conversations just aren't aware? Is it irritating sometimes?
Well, it used to be. I can say when I was in the acute phase of grief, I could not even tolerate a conversation. I really, it was too hard to take in. If somebody was talking about where they got their hair done or what their nails,
Oh,
I could have given, you know,
yeah,
whatever. And, some of that, I mean, I can have a girl conversation, whatever, anytime about this, that, and the other. I mean, we're aging now. We have to have more
right,
conversations. It's not for sissies. So I feel like I'm having more now than I ever did. But,
right.
but the point is, um, you know, it, there was a time when I really could not tolerate that, but also what I've been through has made me have an appreciation for the fragility of life that not everybody does. Um, and I think people do more when they've had different kinds of losses.
Mhm,
I don't take a lot of things for granted, because of what I've been through.
mhm,
So I think, I try to make the most of what I have and what we have and enjoy life and appreciate what we do have and who and love the people we love, and those are the things that matter. I don't, yeah, sure, I love the creative stuff. I love, paint colors and things like that. And I'll talk about where I get my hair done or whatever, but I'm not irritated about it now, but there was a period of time when I could not tolerate a conversation that really, I mean, I wish my worst problem was, having to worry about some of the things that people were worrying about, because none of that really mattered at all. I mean, it was very liberating in some ways because I didn't give about any of that stuff.
I love that, Mary Beth, because really and truly, and I'm throwing this out there to you, audience, and send questions and comments and all the things because we're here with this very lovely human being who shares so generously. Thank you. And so honestly, and really and truly, I think that the gratitude that has been with you your entire life since you were little, I do believe that it's kind of hard to believe, but your journey has brought more, that has grown into, like you said, you don't take anything for granted.
Right. And look, it's not to say there aren't times I don't struggle, believe me, even with the gratitude thing. But I have to get I
20 rule.
you have to be deliberate about working on it, when things drag you down, because they can. I mean, come on. If I went into the whole detail of, all of the things that have happened along my journey, there's some that have been really tough. And there are times when I have felt overwhelmed with it all and been overloaded with bereavement and all kinds of other things. But I think it always goes back to being able to experience those, first of all, loving deeply, surrounding yourself with those people, having that community, and, finding joy, laughter. I'm a big believer even in dark humor. I mean, some of the things I laugh about, you just have to. I
Oh,
wouldn't survive without it. But I
oh.
think, sometimes we all struggle to find gratitude when we're in certain places or times in our lives.
So as we go, and I'm looking down because I know we are out of time for this call, and I'm going to ask you on the spot in front of everybody. Will you come back
Oh,
regularly?
I will anytime, because we
So,
really didn't even I don't know if people.
oh, we have not scratched the surface.
No.
However, so parting words to everyone. What are good ground rules for daily life. I'm gonna back up again, and this is kind of a I want to bring it up again. I believe, which is why I'm doing a deep dive into surrender and the power of it in the
Mhm.
practice of that surrender, which you reminded me of that because, like you said to the audience, I love you said, believe you me, there are those days. That was funny, by the way. When and we have shared those days on
Right.
both
Yeah,
of us
you
have
have
shared those.
definitely been with me through
Well,
those
well,
days.
we both have been with one another, but
Right, right.
the cool thing about that is I want to remind the audience that what she's saying is the practice of the surrender. It's not like it's not coming back, whatever. And this can be, and again, to Mary Beth's point, in anyone's daily life, stuff comes up.
Yeah, it's all relative. It doesn't have to be this kind of, tragedy. It's just life. I mean, there's stressors and disappointments and losses in different ways. And as we go through different stages in life, we, aging and children growing up and, it's all, I don't really, my parting words, I don't know how I could say it other than I think we do have to be deliberate about number one, just staying connected to the people we love because I think it's important to have our community. I think community is very important. And that's one of the things I'm passionate about because not everybody does have that kind of community. And building community is part of why I started Tribe Consulting because there are a lot of people out there who you know, need community, need support. So I feel super lucky. But I think joy, awe, wonder, practicing gratitude, um, having a sense of humor, laughing, taking care of ourselves, which isn't always easy, and just loving and being present. I mean, it's, when somebody once said to me, just a day at a time. And I think there are a
Mhm.
lot of times, especially when we're going through struggles where we just have to take a day at a time. I mean, it even says that in scripture that we should live one day at a time, even though we're not really as humans programmed to do that, obviously, when we have kids and schedules and things to do. But when we're in moments like that, especially when we're struggling, sometimes it is just a day at a time.
Oh my God, I love that so much. And I'm going to throw that out. And it does say that in scripture because and it's a question in scripture. What does can worry add to your life? Well, of course, the answer is no. It's going to add stress, which is going to make us
Right,
feel sick and take us out of the present moment. The other question and the statement is there's enough trouble today.
right,
Tomorrow can worry about itself.
right.
And, all these beautiful things Mary Beth has told us to do, be present, be grateful, all the things. And for me, and I can only speak for myself, but it's go to that scripture and say,
Right.
I need help. And
Yeah.
I know some people they'll just open, and of course, all scripture is you know, in context to a story and what's going on around it and history and all the things, but literally just get in there. And we're called, I mean, in my faith and in complete respect for all faiths of love and light, but he says, come to me, all you that are burdened, and I will give you rest. And
Right.
it might be, I remember Mary Beth, you and I used to talk about it might be one moment of rest.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
maybe you might get 2 moments.
Right.
But
And all of it's about being deliberate because believe me, I'm as guilty as any about, if I don't hear, I mean, Allie and I used to laugh when she was in college. I mean, I go from zero to dead in about 5 seconds if my kid doesn't answer her phone when I'm calling her. And Paula Darcy, the woman who talked to me after the accident, who lost her child, said she and her daughter do the same thing. If they don't hear from each other, they're already figuring out what funeral flowers they're going to have. I mean, it's part of the what goes along with what my life story is.
oh,
But
oh,
I have to be deliberate about it too. I mean, we all know how our heads and what we say to ourselves can be some of the worst, we can be our own worst critics.
oh.
And
Here's
believe
the
me,
trouble between these ears.
I know. And look, I just did a post on Instagram about it the other day because I know believe me, I have to work very hard at what I'm sitting here talking about. So it's not
Ah,
like it just, but I think the more we practice, and again, we're going to have bumps in the road, but I think the best way we deal with it is you have to go through it.
and I love the word. So we're going to leave here today, audience. My word's going to be pray. and but be deliberate. I love that, Mary Beth. Thank you. And y'all, you heard her say she's going to come back.
Well,
Lots.
thank you for having me, Carol. This, you know, I'm back anytime you want me.
Oh my gosh. And of course, what we're going to do, just so everyone knows, there will be all the ways to follow Mary Beth, to get in touch with her, to learn more about what she does, because she does a lot. And I'll also list the books that she referenced. Two authors and a lot of books is what she's referenced.
Well, and at some point, my website, we lost all of my references when we moved over to a different format. So we're working on trying to get that back because I do have a lot of good references, book references. So at some point, that'll be up probably on my personal website. So
Yay. Well, everybody's going to now know and spread the word about Mary Beth and her kindness. Thank y'all so much for joining your amazing audience. Mary Beth, I love you.
love you and thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for taking the time.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Father and Coco.